Years ago, a former client woke up one morning and found that all of his accounts had been emptied. Checking account, savings account, brokerage account, gone. And it was the IRS that did it. And if I couldn't get him square with the authorities, he might also lose his job, his house, and everything else. So how did someone making over $500,000 a year get into such a hole? Back then, this client, let's call him Joe, was doing very well. He was a high performer at work, but there was no automatic withholding on his paychecks. So every month, Joe was getting paid and Uncle Sam was not. All of that money was going straight towards a lot of lifestyle spending by him and his family. But why weren't taxes being taken out of Joe's paychecks? Well, Joe worked in a partnership. If you're an employee and you get a W-2 from your company, you probably don't have to worry about putting aside money for taxes and sending it to the IRS. Most employees cut a slice of each paycheck for Uncle Sam in the form of withholding, and we may or may not get some of that back in our refund every year. But if you're a 1099 employee, a K-1 partner, or a solo business owner, such as a sole proprietor or single member LLC, no one is automatically taking income taxes out of your paychecks. This could also come into play for retirees who are living off their IRA accounts and not withholding any taxes. You're in charge of withholding your own taxes. Typically, making quarterly estimated payments throughout the year will take care of this. Joe was supposed to be managing his own taxes, but he was doing a really poor job. For years. Every year when tax season rolled around, I would sit down with Joe and get an update on how much he owed. And every year, I strongly encouraged Joe to do something about it. But because of his family's expensive lifestyle and Joe's habit of not setting anything aside to make quarterly estimated payments, he didn't have the cash to pay what he owed. Some years, he would pay a portion of his taxes, but not everything. And the amount he owed kept getting bigger and bigger. And then, one day, Joe received a letter from the IRS, politely asking that he pay up. By the way, if the IRS wants to get in touch with you, do they call you? No. Do they send you an email? No. Do they send you a carrier pigeon? No. They mail you a letter through the mail. So if you ever get a letter from the IRS, you need to take it seriously and take action immediately. So when that letter finally darkened the door of Joe's mailbox, he had a few options. First, he could have called a CPA who is really good with back taxes. As a financial advisor, I know a lot about taxes, but giving tax advice and dealing with the IRS is certainly not my expertise. Joe could have paid the IRS over time with a payment plan. Now, a payment plan is simply an agreement you make with the IRS to pay the taxes you owe over an extended amount of time. Joe could have also tried to settle with the IRS with an offer in compromise. Now, an offer in compromise is an agreement you make with the IRS that settles your back taxes for an amount that's less than what you owe. But Joe didn't take his letter seriously. He didn't call a CPA, he didn't sign up for a payment plan, and his income was way too high to settle for a lower amount. Joe did nothing until the IRS did. One morning, as soon as I got into the office, I got a frantic call from Joe. "Patrick, all of my accounts have been emptied." Their entire checking account had been cleaned out overnight. Their savings account and brokerage account too. As it turns out, the IRS issued a levy, a legal seizure of property to satisfy a tax debt. Their money was gone. So Joe came into the office that morning and we had to make some tough choices to save him and his family. We drained one of his retirement accounts to settle his back taxes, but since Joe wasn't 59 and a half years old, there was a 10% penalty on that large distribution, and it raised his taxable income from that year even higher than it would have been without the distribution. So the next year, we had to tap into another one of his retirement accounts to help pay for those taxes, which of course added another 10% penalty and raised his taxable income for that year as well. Fortunately, Joe didn't lose his job or his house or his family, but it did push his retirement back at least a decade or more. And since he had no more investments left for me to manage, I ended up losing Joe as a client. If he had only proactively contacted the IRS about a payment plan, they wouldn't have issued a levy on his accounts. I don't know where Joe is today, but in this video, I'll show you and Joe how much you'll need to save for the retirement you want. Click right here and I'll see you there.